Okay, let's do this. I I was thinking about this quite a bit. Of course, having to do with today's events, and then also the recent arrest of Ryan Wedding that happened yesterday. But I'm gonna put Ryan Wedding on the back burner here, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more. Obviously from uh, someone who's not directly involved in all of this. And maybe you might find that insightful. Perhaps I'm just another fart in the wind. But we'll just go through this. This shouldn't take long. I'm not going to put myself on the soapbox here and attempt to distinguish myself from any other person or voice that's speaking about this. But through the series of videos, uh, between bits and bytes and the history of propaganda, um, my communication really has to do with trying to discover the motivations and the message that drives people to commit such acts, either out of impulsiveness or out of larger things. Um, so I wrote this down, and we're going to go through it now. And I've entitled it Disco Inferno, the pornography of outrage. Um, because propaganda is weaponized artwork, and pornography in itself doesn't necessarily have to be a terminology used to describe sexually explicit material. Um, in all reality, after these events, there is more than likely someone masturbating to either the actions of these protesters or of the ICE agents and of the government. You never know with how messed up in the head people are and what drugs they're on. Um, so let's start from the definition of outrage, which is a feeling of anger and shock, a shocking, morally unacceptable, and usually violent action. This is comes from the definition written in the Cambridge Dictionary from 2026. I got this from the website. And the purpose of this document is to exercise a brief exposition as to the root causes of outrage and then the justification for casus belli, which is defined in general terms as an act or situation provoking or justifying war by using examples of contemporary media, academic writings, and recent events in the United States, specifically issues having to do with immigration, fraud, and law enforcement within Minnesota. So, number one, Disco Elysium is a point and click adventure role playing game in which the user plays as Detective Harrier Dubois in the fictional world of Revachol. The user or the player is then tasked with solving the murder of a military contractor that was hired by a logistics company, along with three other contractors, to bust up a labor dispute between the company and its unionized employees in a post revolutionary setting. There are themes of redemption, substance abuse, political praxis, psychology, class warfare, capitalism versus communism, and heartbreak. Digestion of this material will involve spoilers. So if you haven't played Disco Elysium yet, I encourage that you do. I actually just wanted to find a reason to squeeze that into this whole thing. But it turns out it does have some relevance. And if you don't want to have to go through, I don't know how many hours it was. 32 hours of gameplay, then you can find other synopses and whatever else talking about this. Next one I want to use is True Detective, which is a fictional serialized television show that follows police officers as they discover a crime, collect evidence, and logically deduce the causes and perpetrators of that crime. A specific reference to season 4 of this series within the season opener that is of a caribou herd that spontaneously stampedes itself off a cliff after being spooked by an unknown entity or phenomenon. Then also Civil War, which is a 2024 film about an armed conflict within the United States between Federalists and secessionist forces. The film is described as an allegory for the political climate within the United States within the past, 10 years. Maybe longer than that. Manufactured outrage can be described as the communication via media through what can be conceptualized as subversive propaganda, but disguised as legitimate, factual, and objective journalism that is manipulated by the withholding of information, the misrepresentation of events, or the glorification of first-hand witness accounts, and depicting the victims or protesters as martyrs, revolutionaries, or righteous upholders of social justice. So we're on to number 5. Minnesota, January 2026. 2 people, Renee Good and Alex J. Preddy, have been killed while protesting and interfering with immigrations and customs enforcement agents performing their duties. Civil reactionaries are capitalizing on these events to justify their opinions and political opposition to the president, disregarding the reasons as to why federal agents are in the area to begin with, or why there is such a show of force, and that these actions are motivated by racism or some permutation of fascism. An NBC News article published on January 23rd, 2026 states that an FBI agent who supervised the Minneapolis field office has resigned, along with 6 prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota over concerns about the direction of the investigation. The political allegiances of these agents and attorneys is not publicly known, and it has been withheld from being published. This knowledge has been publicly withheld from being published. The backdrop of this violence is the protests that took place in Los Angeles in June of 2025, the BLM and Antifa riots, and the various other protests that took place between 2017 and 2021 during President Trump's first term. Protests frequently speak about their ideological opposition to the oppressive Trump presidency, and that they feel that they are on the right side of history as the defenders of both the persecuted minorities and of liberal democracy. 6. Ghosts, phantasmagoria, parapsychology, the paranormal things that haunt us. There exists a field of study called cryptozoology that is not recognized by contemporary science as legitimate due to a lack of evidence of such animals as the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. There are many explanations as to why we do not have concrete proof of these figures of myth and legend. This is logically extended to encompass a psychic phenomenon. These ideas can then expand to the same conceptualization to the field of sociology and adorn it with the same sentiment. And I'm going to call it crypto-sociology. In other words, the legitimization of social movements and causes through academia by attempting to prove various theories and extrapolate meaning from moral outrage. So they don't actually exist. It's manufactured. It's a manufactured outrage. And again, so then someone's masturbating over this and attempting to legitimize their poor life choices or their predilections with literature and with this superiority complex, because that's what it really comes down to. And I'm going to say that a little bit in a second here. So when is humanity truly free? That's a good question, don't you think? There are a number of video games and works of art and literature that ask this exact question. And I'm citing Disco Elysium Not only because I like it, but because it really is worth the time. In one of the endings of this story, the player discovers the shooter and then the real perpetrator of the killings of Ellis Cortiner on an island after a week of investigation and deception by both sides uh, of the conflict that provides the backdrop to the murder. Yosef Leonovich Dross is a deserter and a former commissar of the Communist Party that takes it upon himself to snipe some of the individuals of Martinez as an expression of social justice, ultimately being motivated by jealousy and contempt for moral centrists or whomever he just doesn't particularly like that much. The Hardy Boys, the de facto peacekeepers and unionists in a district without clear police authority that attempt to cover up the murders to protect Classy, a promiscuous woman on the run from her industrial espionage, from interrogation, not knowing who the true killer was, yet more than willing to take advantage of the situation for their own individual gain. After reading the politics of outrage, violence, policing, and the archive in colonial Ireland, is published by Cambridge University Press, 20 September 2024. As an example from history, it is clear that such moments in time are not unique and not immune from sensationalism, but that violence, demonstration, and manipulation of the facts has been and is being used as a political weapon. The disputes between Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants of the 19th century led to the establishment of a policing force known as the Irish Constabulary to enforce the order of British rule. As the Catholics were nationalists and the Protestants were not. And they were fighting over each other over land rights and what we would call in contemporary terms as renovictions. So there is clear distinction between the Freedom Rally here in Canada, the outrages of the 20th century Ireland, and what is happening to our southern cousins. The use of the Emergencies Act by the Trudeau government has been declared unreasonable as of January 16, 2026, which then nullifies the charges laid against its organizers. And if you'll know, or if you don't know, they were charged with mischief and some other stuff, and they were put in jail. And yet such demonstrations are being used as a reason for gun grabs and censorship laws. The same cannot be said for armed protesters south of the border, whom have historically demonstrated their willingness to use violence and propaganda to advance their political agendas. So what does this have to do with Minneapolis? Considering the history of political hysteria within America and American and Canadian politics, a lot more than one might think. A whole herd of people answered the call of the cause célèbre that were willing to hurl themselves blind off a cliff in a wave of suicidal empathy fueled by pharmaceutical-grade amphetamines, benzodiazepine, and carnal desire. Their synapses fried from dopamine burnout, and their psyches infected by academic socioeconomic circle jerking. These are the same people protesting and interfering with government agents, these future humans. They are still living in a fantasy realm that elevates immigrants and minorities to mythical status, willing to disregard jurisprudence, weaponize rage, make themselves subservient, and then ignore the crimes that drew attention to Minneapolis to begin with. Love is love and all that. If you ask the author, this guy, these moments of outrage are expressions of regret, contempt for authority, a lust for the exotic, the fetishizing of diversity, and arguments over ownership of identity, shared memory, and culture. Hey, I was able to do that under 15 minutes. I might have lost it what else to say because without without the illusion, without the delusion, um, blinding me, or with like this Instagram filter in which I see the world through rose-colored glasses, or that I'm trying to fight for this outrage. Individually, I have a reason for my outrage. I have a legitimate reason to be angry about the over exertion or the abuse of power by authority. Right? I suffered because of that. I did. I really did. I lost a year of my life. I got beaten up. My ankle was broken by prison guards because of I was trying to joke around. Obviously, that didn't work out too well. And I don't think it's going to work out too well for those prison guards either. I really don't. Because, I have an affidavit as sober as can be. I have a line of behavior that supports my abilities to conduct myself and make my own decisions. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. But these people, they do. They have something to prove. They really do. And it's going to take a lot more than just a few pieces of paper and a witness statement for anyone to take these people seriously. Because they completely ignored the fraud, right? Amy Bach, mastermind of Minnesota's biggest fraud scheme, says, "I wish I could go back and do things differently." Or getting high off of your own supply. So why does outrage... I have this article from Psychology Today, which I'm going to put in the description as one of my citations. Why does outrage often feel so good? And he says here it has something to do with social hierarchy, right? And the grandstanding is outrage, moral grandstanding, and virtue signaling. Saying my suffering is greater than yours, so my ownership and my entitlement is greater than yours. And so then this land, these subsidies and these grants, they're mine. They're mine. They're not yours. They're not yours. You haven't done anything wrong. But I'm going to project onto you everything that I think is wrong with the society. And I'll do anything just trying to get into the head of this kind of person. And I'm going to do anything to support la revolution. And I'm thinking, anyone that studies communism, Che Guevara, he killed thousands of people. He killed thousands. And he's not the only communist to have done that. I think that's enough. So, thanks for watching and wasting 20 minutes with me. See you next time.